So you talk a lot about how, I think you called it the 70-20-10 principle of how we learn. So the vast majority of what we learn by actually doing. And I love the way that you detail that in the book. So for somebody who wants to become a better leader, especially if they're in a company that doesn't necessarily foster that, how do they get that practice? How do they do those reps?
Well, first of all, a lot of companies don't foster leadership. They don't have a leadership environment. They'll come and say, I love your leadership principles, but I'm not a leader because I don't have the position. In fact, I wrote a book several years ago called The 360-Degree Leader. And I wrote it for that person that, kind of is in the middle, how to influence or lead people above you, beside you, and, kind of around you, that 360 idea, helping them understand that the key to leading people, even if you're not in a leadership environment, is, again, influence. So the question now comes down, then how do I influence people? And if I do influence people, how do I increase that influence? And my answer is very simple. We increase the influence with people when we intentionally add value to them on a consistent basis. Because if you think about people in your life that have a high influence on your life, they've really added a lot of value to you. And so what I share, I do a little simple formula that kind of works, and that is every day, again, consistency compounds. So you put consistency with intentionality, and you've got a powerful combination. So every day I basically do 5 things. Every day, first of all, I value people. It begins there. Because if I don't truly value people, I won't add value to them. You don't add value to people that you don't value. You don't add value to anything you don't value. So every day I value people. That's where it starts. But then every day I think of ways to add value to people. So, I'll look at my calendar and I look at my agenda today and I realize I was going to be with you. And I think, well, okay, how can I add value to you? What can I do for impact theory that'll, just help? Because, again, if you're constantly adding value to people, you're going to be of great value to people. So, okay, I value people, think of ways to add value to people. Then I look for ways to add value to people. When I'm in the setting, I'm looking for, okay, what can I do? What can I say? But what we see is what we look for. And so if I'm looking to add value, guess what? I'll see ways to add value to it. Somebody else might be beside you, not add value at all to you. But I look for ways. And then number 4, I do things that add value to people. And then number 5, I encourage others to add value to people. And I've just lived that simple formula. I do that every day of my life. It's very simple. And I try to help other people do that, understanding that if they do that, wherever they are, leadership culture, not a leadership culture, doesn't really matter. They'll begin to influence and begin to lead people, and they'll begin to make a difference in people's lives. And I think that's essential. But I think you have to be intentional, and I think you have to be consistent. Consistency compounds. I'm 72, and I've been doing leadership for 50 years. And so when people say, well, how'd you become a leadership guru and all these things that you got, I tell them, it's just consistency.
So for those people that are learning the 360-degree leadership, they're not necessarily somewhere that's making these opportunities readily available for them. Other than just adding value, where can they go to learn? What are principles of leadership that they should be taking in this sort of abstract learning that they can then apply?
Well, I think that there are several things. First of all, in the beginning, I couldn't find anybody to mentor me in leadership. They didn't know who I was. And so books became my mentors. And then I did something that I just encourage everybody to do. I've done this for 40 years, is I began to have what I call learning lunches. And I loved it in your green room, your statement on learning. I just love it. But I would go out, I would take somebody like you, Tom, out, and I'd buy the lunch. I didn't even eat, I just had questions. And I would ask you leadership questions. And I would...
What are some of your go-to leadership questions?
Well, the first question is, I always look at somebody and I ask them, tell me about your greatest failure. And the reason I ask that is because I think that the character of a person comes out of their failures, not out of their success. And I think that the bedrock part of the foundation of leadership is character. And you build on it. And so I want to know about, tell me about a mess up in your life. And I've had so many of them. I mean, when people ask me that question, it's kind of like, which one do I pull out? But I really like to talk to people about their losses, because it just really tells me a lot about who the person really is. I'm not sure success does, but I know failure does. So I ask that. I ask one of the questions I ask them is, who do you know that I should know? And that's led me to meet some incredible people in my life that somebody else opened the door that I wouldn't have had. So I just find that in asking questions, in fact, I wrote a book one time, Good Leaders Ask Great Questions. I just find in asking questions, that's the way that I can grow and develop myself the best. And I tell leaders all the time that before you lead people, you got to find them. And I think this is a big miss in leadership. We just assume people are already on our page, and so we just start leading, and we've never found them. And so I think there's a finding, and then these.
Give me a little more detail on that. So you're talking about finding what they want, what they like, what's important to them.
Find out who they are. The expression, Tom, it's lonely at the top. Now, that's not a leadership expression, although people say it all the time in the context of leadership. In fact, I tell people all the time, if you're lonely at the top, it's not a leadership issue, it's just the fact you're dysfunctional. But if you think about it, if you're lonely at the top, no one's with you, no one's following you. I mean, that's a hiker, not a leader. And I think one of the things that leaders need to do, one of the first things is they need to get off the top.
That's interesting. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think that if I'm the leader, I don't ask you to come to where I am. I go to where you are. I get on your ground, because people are more secure in the areas that they're comfortable. And so I always go to where they live and who they are, and begin a relationship with them, and ask questions and get to know them. Just get to know them, because managers try to lead everybody the same, whereas leaders understand that you lead everyone differently. You lead them according to their temperament, according to their passion, according to their giftedness. I mean, there are about a dozen things that you lead them according that is unique to every individual. And so the only way I can lead you correctly, Tom, is to know you, so I know what you care about, and I know what you value. And the moment I do that, then I put all my leadership with you in context of who you are, not who I am. So finding people really means to intentionally value them and show that you value them by learning about them and getting to know them and doing. Then you lead them with their best interest in mind, which is a beautiful way to lead people.
I noticed in the title you said, when a leader believes, sees, and develops the potential in others. Why did you start with the word believe?
Yeah, great question. Because of these conversations I'm having, I realize you are not going to be a people developer. You're not going to push people to a higher capacity, to a larger potential. You're just not going to do it if you don't personally believe in people. If you don't believe that I didn't put this in our notes at all, but I got thinking about it as we were talking before the camera came on, about even Carol Dweck's mindset piece, that you can almost have a fixed mindset about people sometimes. I think, well, they are what they are. No, they're not. It's a growth mindset that I need to have as a leader, to really be believing that people can develop, people can grow. And it's going to be up to me, the leader, I have to believe that.
Yeah.
If I don't believe it, I'm not going to probably commit. I've got plenty of other things I've got to go do, and that's going to take a back burner.
Yeah. One of the things I know you've gotten pushback for when you're in front of the room or doing training or maybe even coaching, where you go,
100%.
Yeah, you know where I'm going,
Yeah,
right? Which is like, hey, we need to put 10 on everybody's head on our team. Like,
yeah, but they're not a 10. They're a 4.
Are you putting a 10 under the team? Yeah, like you get pushback from that, don't you?
Yeah. They're not a 10. They're a 4. I'm not saying they're a 10. I'm saying you see them.
That's right. And that's why this is so important that we're talking about today as leaders, that you have to believe and see the potential of those team members if you ever hope to develop it. Now, let me, just before you go any further, sometimes that it may never come to fruition. You may have the hope and you may see this, but over time, and giving them resources and trying to develop them and giving them opportunities and chances, it may not get there, and that's okay. But you have to start at the place of, you You have to believe and see the potential in others.
Well, people will rise or fall to your level of
That's right.
expectation.
That's
And
right.
I always ask people in coaching, even in front of the classroom, can you tell when someone believes in you, that they think positively about you, when they're interacting with you, when they're talking with you, when they're around you? Can you just tell if somebody thinks highly of you or doesn't think highly of you? And I think most of us can figure out that, yeah, I think they think, well, I raise my game around those people. I don't want to disappoint those people. I actually try to live up to that expectation. And I think so many of us as leaders, we set that. I was just listening to Ed Milet, and I got thinking about how people see themselves, their identity.
Yeah.
And this acts as a thermostat on them. And, you know, a thermostat can heat up the room or cool down the room based on outside circumstances and what you've set it to. Well, if you've set somebody up that they're a 4 or a 5, then anytime they have a winning moment or they're succeeding or advancing, that internal thermostat will just cool them back down to a 5, whatever they are. And I'm thinking, well, you know, if I'm a leader, can I affect that? Can I help them to see capacity, see that potential, and believe in them that they can do it? Now we're on our way. Way before we start developing potential, I believe you've got to believe in them and see the opportunity to do that.
So I 100% agree with you. So once we believe in the people, and then we see that people have more potential, more capacity than what we're currently seeing being lived out, then how do we develop the potential?
You know, for me, and I kind of smile because I had this story that I'd heard, and it really, I tell it because it gets people on the idea of the term is next level. Is that, do I believe that for me personally, there's a next level? Can I, do people that I'm working with know that they have a next level? I guess what I've figured out with most people is they don't even think this way. They think they are where they are, that this is it. And so the story was guy told a story about going to one of these local carnivals, and they had a mechanical bull, and he was with some neighbors, and the neighbors said, "Hey," it'd be like me saying, "Chris, go ahead and get on the bull." He goes, "I'm not getting on the bull." "No, go ahead, get on the bull. This be fun, and there's nobody here. Just get on the bull." And the guy kept rejecting, but then the operator of the bull said, "Hey, let me tell you, it's going to move it up, but don't hold on too tight. Hold on loosely with a loose grip under the rope, and then just go. If you hold on too tight, when it moves, it'll throw you. But if you hold on right." The guy said, "All right, I'll do it." And he got on, and then the bull rose up, and it started flicking this way and flicking that way. And the guy, as he's telling it, said he got a little confident, and he started putting his other hand above his head and holding with one hand, and it went the 8 seconds, and the buzzer went off. Whoop, and he swings his leg off like he's John Wayne, and comes walking back over, and he looks over at the operator and says, "Well, great tip, that was great, thank you very much." And the operator looked at him and said, "That was level 1. You did great. You want to go to the next? There's 8 levels. You want to go to the next level." And then you see the guy running down the main fair at the carnival, and thinking, "Wow, we always think we're doing pretty good where we are, but do you think about there being a next level?" So for me, the first step was really realizing there is a next level. Can I help people find it, and can I help me find it? But can we help people find that?
Hey, podcast listeners, how would you like to be equipped with the tools to continue your personal growth and refine your strengths and weaknesses, all while being surrounded by other growth-minded leaders like yourself? You may have heard of our International Maxwell Conference, or IMC. It's our biannual event in which Maxwell Leadership Certified team members come from all around the world to grow and learn together. IMC this August is the first time we're opening the event to the public by kicking the event off with our first ever Personal Growth Day. This is a 1.5-day event on August 29th through 30th in Orlando, Florida, and it's designed to dig deeper into who you are and how you tick so that you can become the best version of yourself. If you are unable to attend Personal Growth Day in person, we also offer virtual access to the event. If you'd like to participate in a one-of-a-kind experience and stand shoulder to shoulder with growing leaders who will sharpen your skills and equip you to create powerful, positive impact in your life, go to maxwellleadership.com/personal growth day to learn more or get your ticket. We'll see you there.
And for those of you that are not joining us yet on YouTube, you just missed some of Perry's animations on that story. But I love that, right? Like the first thing that you just talked about is that we need to help them believe in the next level. That they first got to kind of believe that. But we need to also make sure that they have buy-in on where you're trying to develop them and where you're trying to take them as a leader.
That's good.
right?
Yeah,
Like
ownership of that.
Yeah, like what are their aspirations? And listen, there are going to be people on your team that you are leading that are not going to have the aspirations that you want them to have, or even you see in them. They're just not going to have it. And you've got to make sure that they have the buy-in. But if they do have the buy-in and they do aspire to what you see in them and you believe in them and you talk about how to develop that, if they do have that, then I think what you got to do then as a leader is not only talk about that of what they aspire to be in the capacity they can have, but then identify where they're at and where they can be, like where their potential is and what you see in them. Once you have that conversation, then what we call, is that disappointment gap there in the middle, which is, hey, expectations and reality are X and Y. Now, what's the gap? And so you are, as the leader, have to define what that gap looks like, and then you've got to help them with resources and tools by developing them as what we call kind of to bridge that gap and to close the gap, so that they can begin to see some wins, right? A great story. Level 1 on the bull, right? He saw a win.
Yeah.
Was it enough to get him at level 2? No, not enough for that guy. May have not have been enough for me either. But I love that, how he taught him a little bit, developed them, that bridge, that first gap, getting on there. And so as leaders, you have to, again, let me just go back. You need to make sure that they have buy-in. They aspire to grow their capacity and grow their potential. You have to help identify kind of where is reality versus where that aspiration or potential or capacity can be. And then you got to help resource them and develop them with kind of bridging that.
Yeah, I love that. So hearing you describe that way, it really is what many leaders don't think about is that some part of your coaching conversation, you can't just jump to the development, the skill, the goal. Some part of that's got to be in understanding what are they capable of, what is their capacity, do they believe in themselves, do they have the potential, do they see the potential, and can you come to agreement with what is it we're really going for here? What is the next level for you? And I'm here to help you get there. And I don't think I ever spent much time. I always kind of jump to the punchline of the coaching. Let's work on this, and they must be shaking their head the whole time,
Right.
thinking, I can't do that.
Yeah.
What are you, crazy?
Yeah.
But they'll put on a good act, and they don't want to, disappoint and those types of things. I think it's a great big, great piece of what we do to help people believe
I do too.
that they can do more,
Yeah.
and that I believe in you. And I
Yeah.
think for me, if I had somebody believing in me, that was a lot of the problem right there. Is that you believe in me?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe I could believe in
Maybe
you
you
too.
can do it. Yeah. Finally, one last comment about this. We're talking about this, how to get creativity in your team and your meetings and your leadership. When you come out of those meetings, it's okay, leaders, to give credit to how the team, to the individual, however you got to that point. You brought an idea into the room, and like John says, if we don't leave with that idea being greater than it was, then shame on the people that were in that meeting. But when you do get to that point, give credit to the team for doing it, because you want to create more energy around creating greater ideas, to making sure that this organization, your leadership, your team, of what could be, make sure that you do that. But
Okay.
if you don't, no, Jake said you can't talk. David.
Yeah,
No,
I'm
just
going
go.
to, because the quote's from Jake. So
Okay.
he's going to give you
All
a
right,
hall
all right.
pass. So listen to this quote in our notes that Jake found from William Arthur Ward. The mediocre leader tells, the good teacher explains, the superior teacher demonstrates, the great teacher inspires. And our sense of responsibility.
That's tweetable.
That's tweetable. Our sense of responsibility, leaders in creative environments, is to inspire creativity, not tell it, not explain it, not demonstrate it, but to inspire it.
That is so good. Yeah. Okay. So I am going to move to one last point, and then I just want you to kind of comment on this, and then you can kind of wrap up for us. I bring this up, which is the last point that John talks about, where we create options, because I know that John loves options. I also know that from your leadership standpoint, you love options and have learned to be extremely flexible when it comes to this side of things. He talks about a quote from Andy Stanley in there about where, hey, listen, may be unclear, but I am certain about certain situations, right? When you have that mindset and you can communicate to the team, and I share this because I just want you to talk about this, because I've seen you live this out, where you come into our organizational meetings or our leadership team meetings, you go, man, I am certain this is where we're going. This is what we're going to be doing. I don't know how, You're going to help me figure that out. I need the creativity of the team to help me figure that out. Talk about the power of a leader being able to be flexible and to be vulnerable, to be able to say, hey, I'm certain this, but I'm very unclear of where we're going or what it's going to look like, and I need you to help me get there. Talk about that from a leadership perspective.
Yeah, recently in this very studio, I did a lesson on the law of navigation, which is one of John's law in 21 Laws.
Yeah.
And he talks about in that lesson, he talks about how great leaders know how to chart the course. By the way, that digital product is available. We'll put a link on there for you to get it. It's a digital product on the 21 Laws. But as I was teaching the 21 Laws, I began to talk about my responsibility, because John's given me a lot of credit through the years, not on the 20 other laws, but he did give me credit like I had one of the laws. Got a lot of work to do, team. But he says law of navigation is one of my best. I teach often that the way that I have led in the law of navigation for John is to quickly be able to identify a problem, to just as quickly be able to identify a solution, and then to give John 3 options to pursue that solution. Well, what that did is in the area of problem solving, which Carly Fiorina says is leadership.
That's right.
In the area of problem solving, I have become creative in the area of solutions and ways to solve problems, because that's what I have served John. So in this law of navigation, so coming back to that in your question, I believe that find an area of your gifting. So John says that I'm gifted in the law of navigation. No other law but the law of navigation.
20 to go.
In that area where I'm gifted, I have worked hard to develop creativity in my gifting. Now, what I have discovered, Chris, now that the vision of the organization is my responsibility, what I learned in developing creativity and problem solving is transferable in creativity and vision casting. But if I would have started with vision casting, imagine casting vision with John Maxwell as the organizational leader.
Right.
That's a joke. But if I would have tried to become creative and wow people with my vision casting when it wasn't even, number one, my strength or my responsibility, I would have gotten frustrated in developing creative. And what I've done, what every leader's done, I'm not creative.
Yeah, shut down.
I'm not creative. But I discovered where to find creativity was in the area of my strength, and now I am finding that is transferable in other areas that I'm learning.
Yeah, that's so good. But what I love what you said too there is it's so true, because I think back to the last 18 months, no matter what your KPIs are, we're talking revenue numbers, different COGS, all that. Whatever your KPIs are, you should have these goals, whether they're lofty goals, whether they're small goals. And what I was thinking about when you're talking about that, and I want you to unpack this a little bit for us, is I was thinking about the last 18 months when we all had to throw our business plans out the window.
That's right.
And what you came to us and said is, hey, we value growth. And growth is something that we're going to focus on. I'm going to throw out the comparatives, and I want to see a small growth in something in your business month over month. That's what I want to hear about. And I thought that was so important, because it re-engaged our team and go, we'll never get there to that goal point, right? And we got frustrated. You brought us out of that frustration and said, no. Every single month, I want growth of some kind. It may not be what we're used to. It may be a different KPI, but I want you talking about growth. Talk a little bit about the importance of that when you got to be flexible, but then also dialing it back down and making sure that we're really focused on the small things, which will then take care of the larger things in our budgets, our KPIs, whatever they might be.
Yeah, so Chris, you and I have been a part of John's organization for longer than what you and I really want to admit. Certainly before my 15-year-old daughter was born, before your daughter was born. Was Rylan born when you first started?
He was not.
He was not. So before kids.
Yes, before
okay?
kids.
You and I started, and there's something, again, that I promise you is consistent to us. We, if you're listening, I'm holding up the 15 Laws of Growth book. We value growth. Now, when I say we value growth, do we value growth or do we not? And so what happens back in March and April and March, April, and May of 2020, back in COVID, we kept coming and reporting off of our numbers, Chris, and it was like a funeral every time we came, because we were trying to report off of something that was dead. Our business plans were dead, and we kept coming trying to do it. And I went home that second meeting, and I went, I can't do this again. I can't do it. I will lead through difficult times. I'll lead through it, but I can't be a part of an organization that is post-mortem in everything that we're talking about. I can't do it. So like you said, we threw that out and we began to highlight growth points. I'm going to pause right here. And to those of you viewing, I'm going to challenge you to go pick up this book, 15 Laws of Growth. For those of you that's listening, I'm going to challenge you to go to the podcast notes. And we're going to put a link in there to go order the 15 Laws of Growth. In fact, we've got a discount, 15% off to celebrate January as Growth Month.
Great book to start the year off
It
with.
is. And it's a great book to start off with if you've never read a Maxwell book. It's a great book to go back and remind yourself since it's January, because some of you have goals of losing weight. Can anybody relate to that with New Year's resolutions or the other thing? I celebrate every last bit of that. In fact, could stand to lose a few pounds myself. But what are you doing to grow your leadership effectiveness, your leadership influence? That question and a plan around answering that question can be found in this book, 15 Laws of Growth. Chris, when you and I, over the last 20 years, one thing we know is this environment expects growth. I love doing these podcasts with you. We get great feedback all the time. But I'm going to tell you one of the things I love about the last 5-6 years is thinking about the growth that we've been able to see in each other.
Yeah.
Chris, for those of you that don't know, John started putting me on a stage to communicate when I was terrible. As Charles Barkley says, terrible.
I was getting ready to say,
I
where'd
was
that come
terrible. I was terrible. And Chris, every once in a while, I'll communicate to the team or I'll do something else, and you'll come by and say, "Man, that was a really good communication." What you're really saying is you were really bad before. No, that's not really what you're saying.
I'm seeing growth in you,
You're
Mark.
seeing
I'm seeing growth in you.
You really are highlighting growth. I do
Yeah.
the same thing with you.
Yeah.
Man, you think about the load you're carrying for our organization right now. You're much more than corporate solutions group leader. You're carrying some of these integrated, merging, acquisition things that we're doing. Why? Because of growth. We didn't set out a goal that said Chris is going to own this many merging and acquisition things that we're doing. We set out saying, Chris, can you grow? Can you find your leadership voice? Can you step up? Are you available? Let's go. And I'm watching that happen.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Listen, we wanted to give you kind of just a snapshot into Mark's leadership in regards to personally, but then even in the team. And we're grateful that you're listening, and we want to make sure that it resonates where you're at with your leadership. I'm going to throw it back to you to close.
Okay.
Before I do that, though, I went back, and one of my favorite books, not the favorite, is in addition to The Laws of Growth, is John's The Leader's Greatest Return.
Yeah.
And I knew we were talking today a little bit to our listeners about a team growth and in this growth process. And so John, as he does, spells out the word growth and then has a couple of statements. Let me just throw it back to you. Let me share these, and then you can kind of wrap us up. John says this: when you're challenging a team to grow, do these following things. I just want to share it. It just spoke to me as I was reading it. He said, for G, he said, give them a growth environment. You need to lead them into a growth environment. It's what you challenge us in our organization for. The R, recognize each person's growth needs. You got to help them identify that. You sit on the other side of their leadership. You need to be aware of that. He says in O, he says, open up opportunities for them to grow. Doesn't mean you need to add an extra meeting to the calendar. It could be other opportunities where they join you in certain meetings or certain experiences. W, he says, walk with them in the challenging times. Growth is not going to be easy.
Yeah.
And I think about some of the challenging times that we've been through, and as leaders have walked with me through that. Final two, he says it in T, he says, teach them to learn from every experience. We talked a little bit about that earlier. And then finally, for H, John says, help them to add value to their teammates. And I love that he wraps it up with that, because you and I know in our organization, one of the things we want to see is we want to see a replicatable, that's the right word, a little Southern, Charles Barkley, of adding value and helping others grow. We want to see it in every part of our organization. So I hope this adds value both from your personal and team journey, and then a little note from John just about the importance of growth.
So since teams are so important and people are so important in helping you stay in the first place, my final thoughts to you are this. Look for teammates. When you get into developing a team, look for teammates that are, number one, believers. Few people are successful unless a lot of other people want them to be. Get believers on your team. People that believe in your mission, people that believe in you, people that believe in your values, People that believe in your company, believers. Number 2, achievers. You're only as good as the people around you. A number 10 organization must be full of 8s, 9s, and 10s. So you want believers, you want achievers. Number 3, conceivers. Good ideas guarantee the future success of an organization. If we always do what we've always done, we'll always get what we've always got. So you want idea people, people that come up with great thoughts and ideas. And number 4, you want relievers. Many hands make light work. Gifted hands make successful work. Complementary hands make teams work. I guess this will be the conclusion of it in your notes. 1 besides 1 equal 11. It's pretty good math, isn't it, huh? 1 beside 1 equal 11. Many, many years ago, I'm talking about in the early 80s, 1980s, I came up with this just quick acrostic of team. Together, everyone achieves more. That's a fact. Together, everyone achieves more.
Hey, podcast listeners, fall is almost here, which means it's time to get your tickets to Live to Lead 2022. Live to Lead is an annual event broadcast live from Atlanta, Georgia to hundreds of communities around the world. It's an event meant to bring the best leadership teaching to intentional, active leaders everywhere. Join other leaders like yourself who are stepping up to create powerful, positive change in their organizations and communities. We're offering both in-person and virtual tickets, so be sure to grab yours at livetolead.com. That's live, the number 2, lead.com. See you soon.
Welcome back, Becky. Every week I get the privilege of getting multiple emails, posts, podcast comments, and I have to tell all of you, whether you're viewing, whether you're listening, that it's fuel for Becky and I, all of my co-hosts, Jake, our producers. We all just, we get great fuel, great energy from your feedback. And most of the time I save it to the end. But today, because we're talking about we, and because the comment is such a me to we comment, I thought I would share it with you today. Now, this came in the form of an email. Most of ours is just a 3-sentence little post, but this one's a little long, but I want to start with it because it really illustrates what John's trying to communicate today. It's from Rashu, and Rashu, I think he heard it on, he heard it on one of our most recent podcasts, and here's what he said. He said, I wanted to write this email of appreciation for a long time. I love what you guys are doing by sharing and teaching the leadership wisdom in this podcast. Many years ago, as a young engineer, I lacked the wisdom that I needed to work in my workplace. I was technically smart, which was attested to in my yearly performance reviews, but I was always flagged for my leadership skills or lack thereof. I always thought of myself as a force of nature in my leadership. He laughs out loud, but he says, what a mess. It was John's book, The 360-Degree Leader, which revolutionized my thinking. I was led to this book through your podcast, which I started to listen to back in 2018, November. Rashu, thank you, man. You have been with us a long time. Your family. He said, this book that you recommended in this podcast, it gave me specific actionable thoughts on how to lead my peers, lead managers, and folks who indirectly take my direction as well. I went from 0 to 70 so fast. I still have a long way to go, but I was able to be an effective leader, an effective executive, as Peter Drucker says, because of what Maxwell leaders do every day. Each day when y'all, I love the y'all, Rashu, that's my language, buddy. Each day when y'all wake up, you educate, equip, and empower millions like myself to be effective in our workplace and daily life. Since 2018, y'all have revolutionized my world. I have been buying all the books of John as well as getting them to folks because I believe in this message and I am an eager witness to this change. Thank you, Rashu Thomas.
Wow.
I know. And let me tell you this, a civil engineer,
Yeah.
Very, very interdependent.
I'm married to an engineer.
There you go.
Yeah,
You get it. Pretty self-contained, not always extroverted. And what he did is he said, I went from 0 to 70 when I stopped making it about me and started making it about we. I think one of the best we books, shameless plug here, I'm going to talk about another book, but one of the best books on we leadership is 360 Degree Leader. And that book impacted me because it's how to lead above, how to lead around, how to lead below. And that's what we're talking about here today. How do we go from me to we?
Yeah, and I love that testimonial because every single one of us, it's not like it was just one moment where you realized, hey, you're not as great as you think you are. And by the way, even when you're in your greatest moments, it's not just because of you. I love when John always talks about when people come up to him and say they're a self-made anything, and the idea that that doesn't exist. And none of us are. We're all a product of our environment and our coaching and people around us. And so the fact that he was so open with recognizing that about himself, I think that's what we're addressing today, is how difficult it is to put your ego aside and say it's never just me in this whole process.
And you mentioned ego, and I agree, and John mentioned ego in the teaching, Becky, but sometimes it's really not ego, although we kill ourselves, we crucify ourselves because it feels like ego. Sometimes it's just, I really can do it better than everybody else. And that's not an ego statement. It just takes a little bit of time, leaders, impatient leaders.
Yeah.
It takes a little bit of time and discipline, commitment to go from me to we.
It does. I would say that's probably one of my biggest hurdles, and it's not because I don't love team. I love, love, love team. But there are places in your growth, especially if you're a producer, that you're very used to relying on yourself and knowing that when all is said and done, if it's up to you, you'll make it happen. So it's taking a step back sometimes and realizing just because you can get it done doesn't mean it's the best way to get it done. Yeah. And it doesn't mean it's going to be the best product as well. So I think him recognizing that, and all of us recognizing that in that process, that really is that first step to being the leader that you would want to follow.
I wrote a statement at the top of my notes as John was talking. There's nothing profound here, but there is something significant here in this statement. Teams that can't function without the leader is limited in its effectiveness. Now, again, that's not profound. We all could have wrote that as we just were listening and absorbing what John was saying, but here is the profound thought in that for me. Not the statement, but the reality. And the reality is, as a leader, I love to be wanted and needed, and I want my voice to matter. But more than, and I want it done faster, which is why some of the times I don't move to a we mindset. I can just get it done faster, Becky, and that's not a statement of egotism, it's a statement of reality. However, it will only be faster for so long because then I become weighted down because everything relies on me.
Right.
It will only be effective for so long because I will cease to see the horizon because I'm watching the path. And as a leader, we've got to awaken ourselves from this me to we. Yes, if you're egocentric, get out of it. You're wearing everybody else around you. We know you're okay, but you're not as good as you think you are, okay? Now we got ego out of the way. That's not always the reason that I feel restricted from moving from a me to a we standpoint. I go longer and harder on a me concept to get things done quicker, to get them done like I want them to get them done effectively. The short-sightedness of that, however, is the reality of that statement. The team cannot be as effective as it should be until we move to a we mindset.
Yeah.
Pure and simple. Therefore, the thing that's got to awaken us leaders that are challenged with distributing responsibility or distributing empowerment has got to be the reality that we cannot be as effective if we don't learn how to do this we thing better.
Yeah, and I think that also comes back to a level of awareness of knowing and being honest with yourself of what your strengths and weaknesses are. I remember my dad, who's had a lot of success in the business world, when I was a teenager, coming home just frustrated from some of his board that he was around, and him just saying, look, the smartest business people I know are the ones that recognize what they can and they can't do. And they're smart enough to put people around them that are better than they are at certain things that they just are not naturally inclined to be good at. And that's always stayed with me. And it's interesting how John breaks it up in believers, achievers, conceivers, and relievers. So here's a trick question, Mark. Which one are you?
Ooh, achiever.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny. So I didn't know you were going to ask that. We didn't script that at all. But I want to be a believer, and I think I do okay with that. I conceive things pretty well, and then obviously I go over to a reliever. I've relieved John of a lot of responsibilities over the last 12 years as CEO. But that achiever thing, man, I want to get it done. Now, here's the beautiful thing of that. Because I'm an achiever, when something needs to get done, it's a limiter to go into we. Because put me in, I'll get it done. Well, putting yourself in as the leader all the time stymies the growth of people around you, limits the creativity of people that really can do it better than us. Don't tell anybody I said that, but they can do it better than us. And then finally, it ceases to expand our bandwidth to have time to do what only we as the senior leaders can do.
Yeah.
But it's achiever.
It is. But at the same time, I can also see pieces of all of that in you as well. And I think that really is that when he talks about the 360-degree leader, I think we all have that strength that probably stands out. But I've seen at times, and everyone has, of being able to kind of be well-rounded in all of those things. It's interesting how I don't think those are, I wouldn't say reliever is where I would want to be.
Yeah.
It's not my passion, and so it's not what fuels me. But again, out of necessity, it can be a strength.
Yeah.
When it has to be.
Well, and watching you and the effectiveness of you and our team is not only believer. I think you're strong in the believer standpoint. You believe there's a way. You believe you'll figure it out, and you have the ability to instill that into the others of the team. So then therefore, when you're really focused on a task, because you've instilled belief in your team, they can begin reproducing belief that the project's going to work. I was struck in this lesson of John moving from me to we. Because most of you in our podcast family, you're very familiar with, by now you're familiar with Maxwell Leadership Growth Plan. You're familiar with Maxwell Leadership Certified Team, an army of 44,000 coaches in 165 plus countries. We're familiar with the new brand, Maxwell Leadership, not John Maxwell Company. It's really a me to we move that we're in, Becky.
It is.
You and I, and even our podcast family, all of you leaning in, you're helping us go from me to we, because we've been a persona brand, the John Maxwell Company, and we're becoming a philosophy brand, Maxwell Leadership, a way to do great leadership.
Yeah.
We're going from founder. And in every organization, if you're going to sustain, you're going to have to extend, succeed beyond the founder. And we're in the middle of going from founder to foundation. It's a me to a we move. You've heard us talk about content, our thought leaders. The people that we have brought on our team, we've had them on this podcast, Jeff Henderson, we've had Tim Elmore,
Yeah.
we've had Joel, we have Don Yeager is one of our incredible thought leaders. We've had these thought leaders that come in, and that's a me to a we move for John and for our leadership. We have these guides in our Maxwell Leadership Growth Plan, and that's a me to a we. So many times we see, who's your mentor? John. Well, we're establishing other mentors that know the Maxwell philosophy. And it's not easy.
No.
It's not easy as an organization. Guess what? It's not easy as a leader either to move from me to we. But it's necessary to expand and extend.
And it's definitely an intention in everything that we do. And starting from John to Mark through every person that's a part of Maxwell Leadership, it is just a natural intention every single day to be able to grow that, including our podcast. I mean, we go from vision to vision casters to vision carriers. I mean, even this testimonial of being able to apply that, you see that every single day. And living it out are two different things. And it takes a team to be able to produce all of that. I love this conversation because I love teams. I mean, when you think about a dream team and you think of the vision of a dream team, what team comes to mind when I say dream team?
Well, so I go back to my first admission of a NFL pro football team was Miami Dolphins, and it was the Orange Crush. Their defense back in the 70s was just like everything. So there's that. You know, I think of sports teams a lot, but I will tell you that for me, and this is going to sound rote, so forgive me, and you're on this team, so forgive me if it sounds like I'm just saying the right answer at the right time. But the team that I have around me now as a leader is literally the best team I've ever worked with. And I'm not saying that we don't have our challenges. I'm not saying that we've got it all figured out. I'm not saying that we don't need to add additional components to our strengths and our skill sets. But I am telling you that I've worked with a lot of teams in a corporate environment, and the team that I get to call my lead team, the team that I get to call my family, our staff, hands down, by far, the best team I've ever had the privilege to work on. And I think what makes it a team, a dream team, is when you're chasing the same thing.
Absolutely.
When you're chasing the same. A dream team a lot of times is, oh my gosh, it's a bucket list. Oh, it's fantasycal. I have a fantasy of a team that just loves each other and we love and live and laugh together.
Yeah.
I think a dream team is also one that's chasing the same thing.
Yeah.
We have a dream and we're going after it. That dream to bring powerful, positive change to our society, to this generation that we're living in. That's a dream. And Becky, you have a kid in school. I have a kid in school, and we have adult kids. I just want my entire my entire family to be chasing this dream of impacting those around us. And so, again, I love this concept of a dream team, this perfect team with great talents and skills and abilities, and oh my gosh, we're playing so well together. But I also love this idea of a dream team chasing the same thing.
The word today on Minute with Maxwell is team. Hi, my name is John Maxwell, and one of our team members, Dr. Shaw from Henderson, North Carolina, gave us the word team. I can remember several years ago, I was working on a lesson on team and trying to help my staff, work together better. And all of a sudden, I took the four letters, TEAM, and I began to teach that together, everyone achieves more. Because it's true. Teamwork makes the dream work. And we achieve a lot more as a team together than we do on our own. In my book on the laws of teamwork, I have the law of Mount Everest that says, as the challenge escalates, the need for teamwork elevates. I also teach the law of significance. One is too small of a number to achieve greatness. Well, how do we achieve greatness? By teamwork. How do we climb Mount Everest? By doing it together. Nobody does a solo trip to the top. So thank you, Dr. Shaw, for that word for a Minute with Maxwell today. It's a good one. So let's go out. Observation number 3. Our biggest crisis is our loss of values. I'm not trying to in any way underestimate the crisis that we have. We all know that there's racial inequality. We all know that it's wrong. We all know that it's a cancer in our culture. We all know this. I'm not trying to minimize anything that is before us, the pandemic. I'm not ignoring this, but listen to me very carefully. I'm going to repeat it. Our biggest crisis is our loss of values. I know that to be true because in 1992, Larry Kirschbaum, who was the CEO of Time Warner, I was writing for Time Warner at the time, Coleman in New York City. We had a long dinner, and it was during the Enron crisis, and it was the beginning of this corporate culture of deceitfulness and fraud and quick and easy dollars to be made, and literally leaving employees holding a bad outcome, an empty bag. And Enron had just hit and was major news. And so Larry said, John, I want you to write a book for me on business ethics. And I said, well, I can't do that. He said, why? I said, because there's no such thing as business ethics. He said, well, what do you mean? Look at Enron. And he began to name other companies in America that were just doing wrong, that didn't have ethics. He said, they don't have business ethics. I said, no, you don't understand, Larry. There's no such thing as business ethics. I said, there's just ethics. That's all. There's just ethics. And if you have them, it works in business. Oh, happy day. And it works in your community. It works in your family. And if you don't have them, it doesn't work anywhere. And of course, he was, he's a promoter. He's a publisher. He said, oh, I love the title of the book. There's no such thing as business ethics. And literally, the book came out with that title, and we won several awards from ethic communities and societies about the book. That's not the point right now. It's called Ethics 101 now. But anyway, here's the point. The point being, I knew that the only way that I could help us get right our ship was to go to values. And I went to an incredible value, the Golden Rule, which is absolutely embraced and taught in every religion and every culture. We did research on it. Every religion, every culture has the Golden Rule. It's a terrific value. Treat others as you want to be treated. And I literally built the entire ethics book on the Golden Rule. That was life-changing to me because it was a eureka moment, and I learned something that I'm very passionate about to now. Now, let me give you the observation. The observation is very simple. The biggest crisis in our lives is the loss of our values. We've lost our way, folks. We've lost our way. In fact, that is such a fact that no matter what country I'm in, when they ask us to come in and begin to teach values in the country, I don't have to convince anybody that we have a values deficit, that we've lost our way. So here's the adjustment. The adjustment for this is that we need to embrace unchanging values in an unpredictable world. And by the way, that's not my thought. That thought was several centuries ago by Plato. By the way, there's a book that you really want to get. I've read several books during the COVID-19 and what we're going through right now, but it's called Plato's Lemonade Stand. It's by Tom Morris. Plato's Lemonade Stand is a phenomenal book, and I'm going to read. I'm going to read from the book, okay? And I'm just let me read for a moment because I want to make sure you understand. This isn't my thought. This is the thinking of great men and women of the past. Here's how Tom Morris writes it in the book, Plato's Lemonade Stand. A champion wrestler as well as a great thinker, Plato took his stand on unchanging values as the ultimate leverage we have for grappling with this unpredictable world. Centuries ago, folks, centuries ago. He was convinced that we could attain true success in life only if we first understand the things that never change and use them well as our reference points from moving forward productively through life's uncertainties. He continues by saying, centuries later, Jesus of Nazareth talked about building a structure of your life on solid foundation of unyielding rock rather on shifting sands that provide no sure support. And then Tom Morris quotes Søren Kierkegaard. He said, here's what Kierkegaard said. He said, when the sailor is out on the sea and everything is changing around him as the waves are continually being born and dying, he does not stare at the depth of these, since they vary. He looks up to the stars, and why? Because they are faithful. As they stand now, they stood for the patriarchs and will stand for coming generations. By what means, then, does he conquer changing conditions? Through the eternal. By means of the eternal, one can conquer the future because the eternal is the foundation of the future. And then finally, Tom Morris tells us, I'm still reading, our highest ideals and our deepest values that connect with the eternal can shed light on the often murky and confusing situations we face at work and in our personal lives. Powerful thought. The biggest crisis we have is a loss of good values. I've just finished writing a book. In fact, I wrote it during COVID-19 called Change Your World. And in it, I make this statement that transformation is possible For anyone willing to learn and live good values, value every person, and collaborate with others to create a culture of positive change. We hear a lot about, laws and changing laws, and laws are very important. Laws are guardrails in our community and society. So I'm not anti-law, so please understand, stay with me for a moment. But let me tell you something. You can put a law in the land, and if people lack good values, they'll find a way. They'll find a loophole in that law. They always have. They always will. Discussion truly is over, my friend. You can't board up a country and make it safe by having great laws. It's the values. It isn't the outward law, it's the heart. To be honest with you, I'm a person of faith. If the law was all we needed, then Jesus didn't need to come. The Old Testament's all you got to have, so read the Old Testament and be on with your life. It has to be more than a law. It has to be deeper and higher than a law. It has to be inward values. I had a great discussion last week with my creative team. We spent a long day and a half in Atlanta talking about the transformational values that we teach internationally, and we're getting ready to bring them to America. In fact, my book, Change Your World, will be released in January of 2021. And with that, we're going to begin a transformational movement in America. We're very excited about it, and we've been doing it in other countries. We know what works. And what works is to have what we call transformation tables, small groups, where you teach, live out, learn transformational values. And so we went through the transformational values. I can't give you all of them because there's so many of them. I think there are 25 of them, and it's just powerful. But incredible transformation values such as courage, empathy, forgiveness, humility. Wow. Valuing every person. If we just valued everybody, if we just valued every person, we wouldn't take advantage of those persons. We wouldn't discriminate with those people. It's a values issue. We've got a heart issue. And I'm just so excited. I'm so excited about what can happen. In fact, I told the transformation team, although we don't really like what's happening right now in our country and the crisis we're going through, what a beautiful day for us. Because we understand that we have lost our way with values, and the only way to get back on that track is to get back to the right values, the good values, the golden rule. Treat others as you want to be treated. How complicated is this? For our John Maxwell team, our coaching company, when we introduce them to JMT DNA, we have an opening statement for them, and it's powerful and it works, and I give it to you. We teach all of our coaches when they become a part of the John Maxwell team. By the way, love for you to be a part of the John Maxwell team. 34,000 John Maxwell team members in 170 countries around the world. Wow, it's a beautiful thing. Here's what we say. When we teach about putting on JMT DNA, we say we are people of value who value people and add value to them. It's who we are. It's what we do. Very simple. People of value who value people. And when you value yourself, have self-worth, when you value others, your first response is to add value to them. Just as it's the opposite. If I don't value you, I won't add value to you. You don't add value to people that you devalue. It doesn't work that way. So in our crisis, trust me, my name's John, I'm your friend. We have a values crisis. We do.
The question I want you to ask yourself is not have you seen it happen. The question I want you to ask yourself is this me? Okay, is this me? Because I can tell you the reason I have this list is because about everything I'm going to share with you in a time in my life was me. Okay? When my leadership wasn't mature and my leadership wasn't what I wanted it to be or what it needed it to be. So number one, for example, is fear of conflict. A diverse team will naturally generate differences of opinion, perspective, and worldview that can lead to conflict. And what I have discovered is this. A leader that doesn't like conflict won't want diversity in his team. Because it's just not going to be, the opinions are not going to be always what your opinions, what you want to have. And in your notes, I just have a little place for you to fill in the blank. Fear of conflict limits our potential. The greatest limit upon a leader's potential, I think, is conflict, because that leader then doesn't allow the people to come around him or her that can help them. And an example of that is marriage. What counts in making a happy marriage is not so much how compatible you are, but how you deal with incompatibility. Differences that existed before marriage are intensified when we live with them. Let me just stop for there. Can I hear an amen on that? Huh? Amen. Huh? Isn't it amazing? You get attracted to this person because they're different than you, and you say, oh, I like that. They're different than me, and they add this to me, and you say, oh, this is going to be so wonderful. And then you get married and say, dear God, I don't like these differences in this person. You know, isn't it amazing? What attracts us repels us. It's really true. That's just exactly the way it works. And so the differences that existed before marriage are intensified when we live with it. It doesn't get less, folks. Trust me, if you're thinking about getting married, you can just think about that, okay? You may want to think again, okay? Okay. We come from different backgrounds, possess our own personality, see the world from a unique perspective, and are the unfortunate owners of irritating habits. Isn't it irritating that your mate has those irritating habits? And don't you wish they were like you? Because you have no irritating, but boy, they do, don't they? And just, don't you wish you could just get them fixed, okay? We don't think alike, we don't respond to life alike or act alike, and it can be very frustrating. Rather than allowing that relationship to get tied up in knots, learn to loosen the noose a bit. And that you don't loosen the noose a bit to hang them either, so let's qualify that. Now, let me just say this. If there's conflict, it means you're alive. In fact, the only time you and I won't have conflict is when we die, and then we may have other issues that we don't want to talk about right now. But it's part of leadership, and it's part of life. Today I understand that conflict is not only important in leadership, it's vital, it's essential. I promise you, there's not a thinker in this room that's a good enough thinker that shouldn't have somebody come up against you and challenge your thinking. And if you think you're so good that you don't need to be challenged, you don't need to be at a leadership conference, you're on drugs, you need therapy. Okay? There are places I can send you, but not to me, okay? That will help you with the delusion that you have in your own life. That's essential. Number two, the second reason that I think is quite common, which is a barrier to diverse teams, is just an insufficient personal network. In other words, take an honest look at your peers, your friends, your colleagues. If most of the people you know look like you, vote like you, and love the same music as you, you need to be busy expanding your network. Now, we are most comfortable with people like us. But in leadership, your goal isn't to be most comfortable. Your goal is to be most effective. And I discovered very early in leadership that if I was going to be a good leader, I had to go to places that I didn't normally go to and talk to people that I would not normally mix with, to be able to get insights and thoughts that would never come to me if I stayed in my own group. If you're only in your world, you're not in a big enough world yet. And you need to get out of that world. But here's what I found about this one. You have to be very intentional in doing this. Okay, the third barrier is that sometimes we're unwilling to challenge our own prejudices. Unfortunately, prejudices are still thriving in today's workplace. Some are racial, gender, otherwise. And when you lump people of any type into one bag, box stereotype, you miss out on one of God's great gifts, and that is the diversity of people. I didn't want you to miss this little illustration. It's only a 2-sentence one, so I put it in there for your notes because, again, this lesson goes out to thousands and thousands of people, and I use it for teaching purposes. But the world is like a hand, and all the people, its fingers. And if you hate and destroy one group of people, you lose a finger, and the grasp of the world is less. And I think that is such a great illustration. If you think of the world as the hand and every one of these diverse groups is a finger, boy, you can't afford to lose a finger. You can't grasp what you need to grasp. You can't hold on to what you need to hold on if you lose it. And when I speak on leadership, I still find prejudices. In fact, when I was on my last trip, when we did Q&A, one of the ones that come up to me quite often, especially in some countries over others, is women in leadership. And, do you think a woman could really lead? In fact, my personal feeling is that I think women are naturally better leaders than men. Because I think the core ingredient to great leadership is relationships. Because I think leadership is influence. And the ability to influence people is so key to leading people. You cannot lead somebody that you cannot influence. And I think that women have a natural relationship skill that most men do not have. And I think leading becomes very natural to them, where sometimes for guys it isn't. Now, I'm not trying to do the male-female gender thing at all. The point of it is prejudices. If we have those issues, we're going to have a hard time on diversity of teams, because we're going to keep people off because we don't feel they should be on our team. Number 4 is arrogance. Some leaders are so confident in the sufficiency of their own genius that they can't begin to imagine how people unlike them could add value to their work. And so they just have almost a sense of arrogance. I know the answers. Another barrier is personal insecurities. And this is huge, personal insecurities. If you're uncomfortable around people who are significantly different from you, others will sense it and be reluctant to join your endeavor. Insecurity is a terrible thing in a leader's life because it's the lid. You've heard me talk about the leadership lid in leadership, and how that we all have a leadership lid and our potential, and you've seen me do the illustration. You can't rise above your own ability to lead. The leadership lid in a lot of people's lives is their insecurity. Let me just say this. I have never known a long-lasting, enduring, successful, insecure leader. Now, there may be somebody out there that is. But what happens is, if you are full of insecurities, those insecurities will sooner, usually more than later, undermine you. Well, insecurities keep us from having people that are diverse of ours, because, again, insecure people cannot handle conflict, and they cannot handle somebody that would have a different opinion. And it's just the lid that we put on ourselves. Now, those are some barriers to building a diverse team. Let me give you some benefits of building a diverse team, because there's some wonderful things that happen. Once you commit yourself to diversity, there's some wonderful things that happen. Number 1, a diverse team will fill in the knowledge gap. We all have a knowledge gap, and that is, none of us know enough, okay? In fact, I put in here, it is important to know what you don't know, and know those who do know, so you can focus on what you do know. Okay, now that's when you need to look at it a couple times, all right? You need to go over that little statement, but just trust me on this. Here's what I'm saying. There are a lot of things I don't know as a leader. And I depend on people around me to know those things, because I don't know them. And I not only don't know them, I don't particularly want to know them, because it'll keep me from knowing what I need to know. You have to start with this premise. You can't know everything. So you have to know what you need to know. And what you need to know as a leader are the things that are basic to success in leading. And there are a whole bunch of things that are important to know, but they're not basic to the success of leading. But what you have to do is you have to have people around you that can help you in those areas. And the key is, in diversity, is that when you get the right team around you, that they have knowledge that you don't have, it really begins to fill in the knowledge gap. So the knowledge gap really gets filled in when you got people around you that perceive differently, see differently, think differently, feel differently. That's huge. The second thing you fill in with a diverse team is the perspective gap. And let me just take you through this little sequence right here, because I got perceive, believe, receive here in the lineup. You can see how this is working. And there's sequence I want you to get. What I see determines what I think, which determines what I get. That's a fact. Basically, what I receive in life has a seed of perception in it. That it begins with perception. And how I see something determines how I think about something, that determines most of the time what I'm going to receive out of that. So perception is huge. It's not always reality, but it's huge in how I think and how I act. And so a diverse team will really help us in that process. Because how do I think and receive differently? Well, I've got to perceive differently. Well, how do I do that? I do that by diversity, because not everybody in the room is going to see things like I see things. Number 3, a diverse team will fill in the experience gap. Diversity in experience is really essential. And it goes back to the proverb we heard, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Oliver Wendell Holmes has this great quote, "The young man knows the rules, but the old man knows the exceptions. And to know the road ahead, ask those who are coming back." Very important. Experience. Fill in the experience gap with people around you. Number 4, diversity will allow you and me to fill in the problem-solving gap. Because what do leaders have to do? They have to solve problems all the time. One of the things that I found really worked well for me in the problem-solving gap, and if you're a leader and you have a team, or if you're on a team, this will be some good, I think, practical advice. What I discovered about teams was that there are people on the team that can always tell you about the problem. There are some people, they just automatically find the problem. You know what I mean? They'll just say, let me tell you, there's a problem over here. We got a problem over here. And I got tired of hearing my team talk about the problems. And so one day I looked at him and I said, let me explain something to you. Any idiot can find a problem. So low IQ people can say there's a problem. So if you found a problem, you're not smart, you just found a problem. But I said it takes somebody smart to solve the problem. So here's what we're going to do. Don't bring a problem to me unless you have 3 solutions. It was one of the greatest things I ever did. First of all, it shut up all the problems. You just had all these whiners quit. It's just wonderful when whiners have to shut up for a while. You know what I'm saying? Gives you peace in the valley for a period of time. You follow me? But here's what happened. It got them on the creative side. It got them on how am I going to fix this side. I mean, what am I going to do about it besides just tell you there's a problem here? Hey, and what would you do? And I found that to be a very helpful thing in dealing with problem solving with teams, is just say, hey, please tell me about the problem. But then how would you fix it? What would you do about it? What do you suggest that we do? What would you do? You see, leadership, let me explain something here to you. Leadership is like a quarterback in football. The quarterback doesn't get paid to carry the ball. The quarterback gets paid to know who to get the ball to. And he gets paid to call the right plays and put the ball in the right hands in regards to what situation they're in. And what I want you to understand about leadership is you got to have a team around you that is diverse, that is different. And you got to know what players to call on, because different situations call for different players. When I wrote the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, the most enlightening thing that came out of that book, and when I wrote it, I didn't know it was going to come out. In fact, I write the book, and then sometimes 2 or 3 years later, out pops the thing that really helped people the most. And lots of times I didn't figure it out. I just wanted to write the book because I thought it would help people. But when I wrote the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, a couple years after that book came out, pretty much everybody began to say, I can't do 21 things well. When I evaluate myself with the 21 laws, I'm not a 10 on all those. In fact, on 5 of the 21 laws that I wrote the book, on 5 of the 21 laws, I'm average or below average. And that was a little disgusting to write the book. In fact, those that I was average or below average, I kept fighting that and saying, they certainly can't be a law of leadership. I do them poorly. Maybe there should be 16 laws of leadership. But no, there are 21. I don't do them all well. And what came out of that book was it's very simple. If I don't do them all well, then I need to find somebody that does well what I don't do well. And I need to bring somebody around me that will complete me, not compete with me. They'll complete me. They'll complement me. And that was the essence of what happened. And that's the value, again, of diversity. Well, that's the value of diversity of teams. That's the value of bringing the people together, because magic happens when you're secure enough to bring enough people around you that you can add value to each other. Now, well, let me give you one more thought, and that is the value of diversity of teams. It fills in the giftedness gap. Because Mother Teresa said it well. She said, you can do what I cannot do, and I can do what you cannot do, and together we can do great things.
Hey, welcome back. So glad you're here. Chris, it's good to still be in studio
here.
with
Love
you.
it. Yeah,
Part
love
one, part two. What a incredible day of learning just for you and I on how to lead.
Yeah, and what's been really powerful is even in between this is us having a conversation with our team and talking about what does this look like here? What are the barriers? Have we overcome them? And then now we're going to transition into some of the benefits of it.
I'm glad you said that, because not every time do we get to kind of sit here and do part one and part two, because not every time is a series. But in between us recording last week's podcast and then recording this podcast today, we had a brilliant conversation. We're incredibly blessed with a new teammate, Javon. And Javon brought a perspective to us on barriers, and Jake is just a young, cutting-edge artist. He performed last night. Didn't invite me. That's another whole problem, Chris. You and I were not invited.
Not there.
But our team here and the diversity of our team just caused us to have a great conversation in the middle. And today we get to talk about barriers, or today we get to talk about benefits.
Yeah.
We've talked about barriers, but today we get to talk about benefits. And there's this standout statement that we want to deliver in this podcast that says this: together we can do great things. John quoted Mother Teresa in the lesson, but it's this idea that we are better together when we focus on what connects us rather than what it separates us. And so much of our society is trying to do that. And so, man, I'm excited to get into benefits today. It was Winston Churchill that said, diversity is the one thing we have in common. Celebrated every day.
Yeah.
And I love that. He made a commonplace out of our uniqueness. And everybody that I talk to, no matter what culture, no matter what race, what gender, whatever you come from, everybody wants to continue to own their uniqueness.
Yeah.
But they want to be valued with the common.
Yeah.
And so anyway, man, we're in it today, and I'm super excited.
Yeah, and I love the fact that we've had the privilege of working with a leader and serving a leader that for years upon years has led this way, has had diverse teams, has worked through the barriers, and then we've seen the benefits of that. And I want to dive in and get some of your thoughts from a leadership perspective, as you now are responsible for leading Maxwell Leadership and carrying this mantle of where we're going. And one of the things that I've seen as we begin to build this diverse teams is I love the statement that John talks in here, and he used a lot of they know that, again, you have to go back and listen to it. I think it's in the notes. You have to follow it along. But there's a knowledge gap, and we don't know what we don't know. And oftentimes you and I talk about, because we've been around here a long time and I've been blessed to do that, to where we feel like we're in a bubble.
Yeah.
And I would challenge that. I think leaders out there, the longer you lead, the more in your position, the more you're in the organization, where you go, and we get to a place to where we get very comfortable. We become we have lack of self-awareness, and we don't know what we don't know. And one of the things that you've done as a leader recently is begin to build this diverse team, and the benefits that we're seeing of that is the knowledge, where John talks about increasing knowledge gap. And I've watched you be teachable. I've watched you be curious and ask questions and in a learning mode. Talk about that just from a leader standpoint of the things that you're learning, the people you're bringing around you that are helping us as an organization fill that knowledge gap.
Yeah, for me, it's really easy. I going back to something you said, I don't use the word fear often. And I don't know if it's pride. I hope not. I don't know if it's my macho way of I want to be seen as a guy of courage,
Sure.
not of one of fear. But very rarely times do I feel fear. But I'll tell you, in leadership, there is one time that I constantly feel fearful about, and that is that I'm missing something.
Yeah.
What's it like to be on the other side of me? What are my blind spots?
Yeah.
What am I missing? What is it that I need to know that I don't know? I mean, these are questions that plague my mind quite often. Not always in a healthy way. So
Right.
I'm not going to teach you on how to have healthy fear
Right.
and feeling like you're missing something. There's sometimes I feel like I'm missing something and I'm not, and it paralyzes me just like fear does. But this idea of the knowledge gap, what I am enjoying most about leadership now is when I walk into a setting and leaders have already thought about the next step, and I am surprised. Probably this was most illustrated at the recent event that we have. It's called the International Maxwell Conference. We had over 2,000 people there. We were certifying to be one of our coaches, speakers, trainers. And in fact, if you want more information, you can go to maxwellleadership.com and you can find out more information on joining our team of certified members and be a part of that. But we were at this event, Chris, and we're rebranding. We're doing some really cool, exciting things, and it's a big deal. And I showed up that morning, and my executive assistant, she said, "Hey, you got to be at a staff meeting at 7:30." And I said, "A staff meeting? Why a staff meeting?" She said, "Because some of the stuff you're communicating at 9:30 needs to be communicated at 7:30 to our team. And we've got swag, and we've got gifts, and we got all this stuff." And I went, who thought of all this? It was this perfect euphoric moment for me of how the knowledge gap translated to culture building, team dynamics. And for years, I have felt like those ideas either had to start with me or come through me. And this particular time, I was just showing up, and it was brilliantly done. And that knowledge gap, to your point, of people knowing an even better way and not feeling like as the leader that I had to deliver that was a real cool experience of the diversity of thinking in the knowledge gap, because we have products of the product leading.
And you wouldn't have even maybe thought or known to do that.
Correct.
Right? I wouldn't have. That's
Correct.
not how I'm wired. And so the fact that we now have team members that are thinking outside of experiential things that we would is just a benefit of that. And I love that story. Now, moving right into this next one that I want to talk about. You and I were talking about as we were getting ready to kick this off. We were like, man, I don't think I've heard John talk about that before. So podcast listeners, viewers, this may be something new right off the cuff right here that John is teaching. But if we're going to have people on our team that are diverse and are bringing things to us that we don't know, and it should be that way, what we've got to do is we got to make sure, hey, now we're going to hear a different perspective on things. Mm-hmm. And I love the statement of make sure that we are learning the perspective of others in all situations as a leader versus just stating your own truth, right? So make sure that, hey, they have the knowledge. Not only do they have the knowledge, but we need to understand their perspective. And John lays it out here with these three words that we were talking about: the perceive, believe, and receive. As a leader, talk to me about the impact of that, because that kind of struck you when you listened to John talk about that.
Yeah, and so you always talk about perception. Perception is reality, right? We've heard, perception is reality. Me and my wife disagree about that statement all the time. She says, no, reality is reality. I don't care what your perception is. I go, yeah, but your perception is real. And so we have this
By the way,
conversation.
Stephanie wins.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
Every time.
every time.
Let's make that really clear. So this idea that John is helping me, what you see determines what you think, which determines what you get out of life. And I don't know, Chris, I told you before we started recording, I want to just go and spend a couple of days on how John listed out the perceive, believe, and receive components of perception. Are those the three building blocks? Because I do absolutely believe that what you see determines how you think, and how you think determines what you receive in life. I get all that. That statement is brilliant. But how that is really the three building blocks or components of perception. We talked about Stephanie. Now let me talk about my daughter, Macy. Macy's a driven girl with a lot of strengths and intelligence and things. Just ask me, I'm her dad, right? So she's got a lot going for her. I'm watching her perception. Last night at dinner, I was working with Macy on her perception right before a big key test. She gets all these people that wants them to help them by sending her completed work right before the test, right? Sounds like John paying people to do his homework, but that's a whole
By the way, those that aren't watching us on YouTube, you need to, because there was a little air quotes
Oh, yes,
there
thank you.
that Mark was saying there might be a little bit of...
Sorry, yeah, video podcasters, you caught that. Thank you for making that true. Yeah, that might be a little bit, quote, air quotes, might be a little like John getting some assistance with his homework. But I was telling Macy, I said, Macy, you can either be celebrated or are rejected based on your skill set. If you have a skill set and people want it, whether you help them by sending them free your test results or your test preparation or not is not the point. If you are lamenting the fact that people are coming to you because they recognize your strength of intelligence and preparedness, you will then begin to be ostracized or looked at as a challenging teammate or schoolmate because you're not open about it or appreciative of it. Because she was telling me one of the comments she sent back to them and says, "We're not friends. This is the first time you've ever texted me. We're friends, right?" And we were kind of laughing about it. And I said, Macy, don't despise your giftings.
Yeah.
Embrace them. You still don't have to give out the answers if people don't, or it gets you in trouble and all that stuff. But don't despise your giftings. I was relating with her, if you'll allow me to do that. I said, a lot of times, right in a critical time in my leadership, it seems like everybody needs something from me. This person texts me, that person texts me, I get a phone call. And it's not that I don't enjoy those, Chris. You need to call me more. We travel all the time, get to come to the studio and get to see each other. But it's not that I mind the calls. It just feels like it floods me on the days to where I need this kind of focus. And by the way, I'm covering my eyes, listeners. And yet that's when it feels like everybody's demands on me. And the days that I respond and go, man, can anybody not do anything without them, is the days I'm despising the strength of leadership. Perception, what you see determines how you think. How you think is what you get. On the days that I don't see that as a gift, and I think people are just can't do anything without me,
it'll drive
I
frustration.
get that frustration from a very thing that I have prayed, sought, and trained myself for years, is to be the go-to person.
Yeah.
And we can despise it. And that's a perception issue.
That's
it's not
really
a reality
good.
issue.
Yeah, yeah. And I love how you just took the benefit of having a diverse team and talked about how if you're not careful, it can then overwhelm you and become a frustration. And then what happens? You ignore all of it. So then you're throwing out the benefit of having that diverse team. And so be aware of that. I love how you talked about that. Now, this I want to move to, because we'll spend some time here. This is something that you and I growing up around this organization and the environment know. We were just smiling as John was talking about this problem-solving gap.
Yep.
So the benefit of having people that solve problems differently, that think differently, that have different perspectives, is that you're gonna have the opportunity with the help of solving problems. By the way, a good friend of ours, Carly Fiorini, defines leadership as solving problems,
That's
right?
exactly right.
And so she literally talks about, hey, you are a leader if you solve problems. Now we have a diverse team that will help us solve problems. Now that's great, right? But John laid out an incredible system of how to have the team respond to the leader in solving problems. We're not there yet. You and I talked about that. We're not there to where you have modeled that in your leadership with John, and yet we've got some growth to do. As a leader, talk about the power of that, what's brought to you, what that does for your thinking, what that does for the culture of our organization.
Yeah, and I will. And, you know, I envision our podcast listeners and perhaps video viewers, I envision you like grabbing your pen and paper, and then John gives all this content, and then you kind of sitting back and saying, let's see how Chris and Mark can mess this up in the society. That's kind of my vision of you sometimes. Forgive me. I believe in you a lot more, but I kind of feel like we provide the things not to do and what John says you need to do.
That's right. That's right.
Grab your pen and paper, though, right now, because this is going to be a moment to where I want to mature this fill in the problem-solving gap.
That's good.
Because John said he got so frustrated with people bringing problems. Finally, he said, Don't bring me a problem again until you bring me a solution. When you can bring me 3 solutions, now bring me your problem. He said, it's not that I didn't want to hear the problems. I like hearing problems. I just want solutions with it because my team kept making their problems my problems, okay? I've taught about that before. But I'll tell you, there's a maturation, there's a maturity to that John and I have developed in my last 12 years as a CEO that I want to show you the additional components of that formula, let you take notes on it, and then Chris will talk a little bit about how our team is still trying to mature into this problem-solving gap. So again, problem. This is John's words. I kind of cringed when he said it. He said, any idiot can identify a problem. And I went, I'm the idiot that's identified a lot of problems for John. Present, tardy, guilty, whatever. Any person should be able to identify problems. In fact, some people, the question is are you identifying the right problems? And is your problem really a problem, or are you making it a problem? We got all that.
Yeah.
But there is a problem. And for John and I saw pretty early on that what I identified as a problem, John said, yep, we've got a problem. So now I had to get good at coming with solutions that felt good for how John would solve things. So then I went through a maturity on solution suggestions. And I got better. And so I would come to John and say, John, here's the problem. He'd go, yeah, we got a problem. Here's the 3 solutions that I've come up with. Man, Mark, that's 3 good solutions. But now let's mature this a little bit further to where he would ask, what's your recommendation? So we go from problem identification, solution suggestion, to now solution suggestion to now my suggestion. What is my personal preference on the solution we should go with? Solution selection, maybe. And I would look at that and I would say, this is the one I think that we should go with. And then he would say, why? Mm-hmm. So there's the complete formula. Problem identification, 3 solutions,
recommendation,
option of recommendation, and now why.
That's good.
And what happened in the why, Chris, is John could determine 2 things, because he said often, Mark makes 97% of the decisions in the organization. What he wanted to identify in the why, and we as leaders need to identify, is why. Have you properly thought it through? So it was a question of preparedness. The why was a question. Is Mark prepared when I ask him why? Secondly, it was a question of passion. Was I passionate about my suggestion? So he was going, does Mark have the tenacity to see the solution through? And then it was a question of accountability. Is Mark accountable to something in the why that will hold him true to this being the solution to go through? Good. And so if we can see this this problem-solving gap through the lens of a true, tangible thing that we can process our people through. So now back to John and I have talked a little bit about that from stages in different countries of how we have led together so well. I feel like with John and I, at least, we're getting an A on that whole gap right there. We've done really good with that. Well, then you said, well, how do you think the team's doing? And I went, oh, that might be a C, and that might be a generous C. We're not there. So leaders, vulnerable moment. I'm doing a better job of providing that than replicating it. Now, the question I've got to ask, because right now I feel like I have a lot of problem identifiers, a few solutions, but no ownership to the solutions.
Yeah.
And I've got to work to mature that in a reproducing mindset, because while it feels good to say John and I are nailing it, it does not feel very good to me to say myself and our team are not nailing that.
Yeah. And appreciate the vulnerability. And I went back and thought about even some conversations where I can see you beginning to model that, even in our relationship and our leadership, to where you're like, okay, no problem. What do you think we ought to do? And do I have 3? Maybe not. Do I have 2? And then you go, why? And so I hadn't thought through the process. And I think it's a great model for leaders to understand that you are going to have people on your team. This is an incredible benefit, that are going to think about problems differently than you. They're going to be able to identify them. They're going to think about solving them differently than you. And so as they do that, they may be able to solve them better than you. And that's awesome. That's why they're on your team.
Now, before you go further, let me tell you this. I told you last week that I was going to talk about something I observed in you that was a benefit. this is where I want to serve it. So all of you that tuned in this week to say, good grief, does Chris bring a benefit to the table? I got to tune in. Here's your moment, okay? And seriously, Chris does not even know what I'm going to say.
not.
We have not had one conversation about this, but me and Matt Reardon, our new COO, have had multiple conversations about this. Matt doesn't know mine and your history of saying, Chris, I got to hear you. I got to know what you're thinking. I've got to have your authoritative voice in some situations.
Yeah.
He wouldn't know all of that, never shared it with him, doesn't matter. Shared it a little bit on the podcast. We've laughed about it. We were in our last leadership meeting a couple of weeks ago, and I watched something unfold in our meeting that didn't make sense to me. There was this branding decision about some blogs and how we were going to do our social media and all of that. There was this conversation that came up, and I'm watching our leadership team wrestle with something. And I'm just kind of listening, taking note. I hadn't been in many of these meetings, back to our first
Knowledge
point
gap.
of the
Yeah,
knowledge
benefit
gap.
of
I'm
it,
not
yeah.
in a lot of these. And so I watched you guys just kind of wrestling with it and kind of stayed silent, made a couple of comments about, yeah, the team really needs to be agree with this. And then all of a sudden, your voice comes piercing through the conversation and said, whoa, guys, half of this conversation has been revisiting a decision we all collectively made a few weeks ago. We're talking about the wrong thing here, what we need to be talking about, and then you went on to what needed to be talked about rather than what was being talked about because of that authority. Matt Reardon, our new COO, came to me afterwards and he said, you cannot know what it did for that room, Mark, and even for what I'm trying to influence the team with. When Chris went, we've already talked about this. We are processing. Now you're a private processor. You're a processor, and you do it internally for the most part. I watched you on something that had already been processed through as a team, which we want to be collaborative. I watched you stand with, you didn't stand, but I watched you insert yourself with authority and say, we've already talked about this. We've already agreed. We're talking about the wrong thing. This is what we need to be talking about. And for the people that was trying to revisit it, perhaps to try to see if they could convince somebody with a little more authority to see their way.
To change
We
it.
don't know why.
Right.
But what we do know is every person in the room benefited. It was a benefit of your processing perspective to come in and say, we've already processed this. We decided, quit revisiting what we've already processed. Let's move forward. When you allow people that know how to problem solve, that have giftedness, that has the experience, that has the perspective and the knowledge, the safe place to use their voice, the benefit will move the ball forward for who? Everyone.
Yeah.
The detractors were shut up because they'd already had a chance to talk about it. The people that were not yet mature enough to have confidence to say we've already talked about it were edified because they had already done all the preparation to have it. And then you moved us through to where we really accomplished something in that segment. And it was this moment to where I went back and relived all of our funny conversations and went, wow, that is the benefit. Sometimes you process slower than me. Sometimes I process way too fast for you. But allowing both of us to sit on the same leadership team, it was an epic moment in your leadership because people that have no idea what we've been through, talked through, sit around tables discussing, have no ideas. They just went, oh my gosh. Something was said in that moment that nobody else in that room could say because you had a voice.
Well, I appreciate that.
Isn't that true, though?
It's very true. It's very true.
And you're surprised with that observation because you didn't even know I observed all that.
And the benefit of that, as the topic today around the diversity, is I just think differently.
You do.
And I process differently. And I was listening to this conversation and just to our mentorship and coaching over the years, used a time in the meeting to use my leadership voice of what felt logical to me and where I was at.
It was
and so,
powerful.
again, that's just an example of, and I appreciate you sharing that, but it's an example of having a diverse team. Again, back to what we talked about. Like, we love the fact that John has taught us, and this is what Maxwell Leadership is about, that we want to value all people. And that we want to value them equally in a way, no matter where they come from, the nationality, the gender, the leadership experience, but to use people's gifts and how God created them to be able to impact your organization, to be able to help lead your organization. And by doing that, you're going to have people that are going to help you solve the problems that show up inside your organization. And if you can take the model that Mark just explained to us and begin to live that out and begin to teach it in your organizations, you will see the lid lifted and you'll see the benefits of having people that think and solve problems differently.
Absolutely.
Welcome to the Maxwell Leadership Executive Podcast, where our goal is to help you increase your reputation as a leader, increase your ability to influence others, and increase your ability to fully engage your team to deliver remarkable results.